Hey guys, today I'll be taking a look at the 2022 Senate map based on my very own forecast. So you can find this forecast at paelectionhq.com, and so in this video we'll be going over the methodology of this forecast. It's based on a mathematical model that I've created myself, and I'll also be taking a look at the individual ratings I have for the competitive elections, and then of course we'll be comparing this forecast to other major forecasts out there, like the ones from 538, The Economist, and Decision Desk HQ. And so I'll start by explaining to you guys how this forecast actually works. It's based on 9 different electoral factors that range from incumbency all the way to the national generic ballot. Some of these factors are predetermined, while others rely on how well the candidates are doing in the actual races. And so these factors have been known to affect eventual election results, and they've been weighed specifically for this model to create a forecast sum. And this is also known as the forecast score. And so you can view all of the details here yourself at paelectionhq.com. The link is at the very top of the description below, but the mobile version has not been done yet, so I do recommend that you view the forecast on a computer or something like that. So looking at the forecast scores, basically once we get a score for a race, there will be 8 different categories. It can go from solid Democratic to tilt Democratic, and from tilt Republican all the way up to solid Republican. And so these are of course the ratings that I typically use in my videos. And finally here you will see that if this forecast was applied to different elections in the past, in 2020 and 2018, it only predicted one race wrong in both of those cycles, and the factors for this forecast are objectively measured, so you can actually apply them to election results in the past, and they will not change. And so now we'll take a look at what the forecast actually projects for the races this November. So right now we do have Democrats slightly favored to win. We have them currently winning 51 seats, 49 for the Republicans, with Democrats having very narrow victories in Nevada and Georgia. And so if these races go the other way, they definitely will sway the actual results. Now looking at this forecast page, we do also have a chart here showing the amount of seats for both Democrats and Republicans. As you can see right now, we have it at 51-49. The methodology can be found by clicking on the Learn More button here. And then you can also see the 8 races that will matter the most. These are the key races, and so this basically allows you to easily get to these forecast pages. And then you can also see our ratings in every single state on the map. And so now we'll take a look at the individual ratings my forecast gives to the 11 competitive races that my model has identified. So starting off with the election in Arizona, currently we give it a lean Democratic rating, with Mark Kelly slightly favored to defeat Blake Masters. And so our forecast score currently sits at 39, with Mark Kelly having the clear advantage. So Blake Masters is currently down by 8.1% in the polls. This is a likely margin, but I do not believe, and nor does my forecast believe, that Mark Kelly is actually going to win by over 5 points. We of course take many other factors into account. The state partisanship is one of the big ones, and Republicans do have the advantage in that field. While if you look at fundraising, Mark Kelly is absolutely destroying Blake Masters. He has raised over $52 million. Blake Masters only sits at less than 5, and so Mark Kelly is probably going to win his first full term in office. And for each of these competitive races, we also offer a race summary that you can go over, and this is helpful just for learning more about the actual election. So right now, according to our forecast, Arizona is going to be a lean Democratic state with a score of, in the positives, 39.1. And moving on to Colorado, we have a significantly less competitive race. Here, Michael Bennet is favored to defeat Joe Dea. We have a forecast score of 66.9, which means that Colorado is going to vote for Michael Bennet by over 5 points, but probably not too close to a solid margin. The score would have to be at 105 for this to be a solid race for the Democrats. Now, Joe Dea is the Republican nominee. He's a pretty moderate candidate, and so he will do much better than any other Republican that the GOP could have nominated, but Michael Bennet is still up in the polls by 8.6%. He was first appointed a U.S. Senator in 2009 and subsequently won re-election in both 2010 and 2016. So now Michael Bennet is running for a 3rd term, and all signs point to him easily winning his re-election. We have a race summary here at the bottom as well. But fundraising, we see that Michael Bennet is leading. Polling average, Michael Bennet is ahead, and every one of the previous election results all show Michael Bennet in the favorable position. So Colorado right now is going to be a likely Democratic state based on our ratings. Next up in Florida, we have it as a likely Republican state just barely, with Mark Rubio currently favored to defeat Val Demings. There's a score of 59.6 in the negatives, and this is a slight typo here. It should actually say favored instead of slightly favored, but I'll fix that very soon. But Mark Rubio right now leads over Val Demings. In the polls, he is up by a margin of 3.9%. Florida is definitely going to be a Republican state. Marco Rubio is not going to lose his re-election to a third term. I mean, the only factor that Val Demings has an edge on is fundraising. She's raised $47 million, but Marco Rubio himself has still raised $36 million, so it's really not that big of a difference. Even though it's $10 million, Marco Rubio still has raised $36 million. And so the state of Florida has definitely been a state that we've seen a significant shift to the right in. If you just look at the 2018 Senate election in the state, you'll see that Bill Nelson actually lost his re-election to a fourth term to Rick Scott. Now, Bill Nelson losing was a pretty big deal. This was the only surprise for the Republicans in the 2018 cycle. Every one of the other races that Republicans were targeting in states like Ohio, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Montana, as well as Arizona, all of these races went blue except for Florida, even though Florida has been a toss-up for a very long time. But clearly now Republicans do have the edge. Trump won it by a larger margin in 2020 than 2016. So Florida, according to our forecast, is going to be a likely Republican state, with Marco Rubio currently expected to win his re-election. In the state of Georgia, we currently have it as a tilt Democratic state, a score of 5.1, so this race really is very, very close. If the score just goes down by 5 points, Herschel Walker will be favored. Herschel Walker is, of course, the Republican nominee in this race. He got the early endorsement of Donald Trump and really is not performing as well as he was expected. If you look at the polling, he was ahead for quite a while, especially in 2021. Every single poll basically showed Herschel Walker in the lead, but now Raphael Warnock has taken back the lead and is doing pretty well. Most of the most recent polls do show that Democrats are going to hold on to the seat, and with polls being known for being historically accurate in Georgia, Republicans are definitely in trouble here, especially if you look at the gubernatorial race. In the governor election, Brian Kemp, the incumbent Republican, is still leading. However, in the Senate race, Democrats have a significant advantage. So our forecast right now does favor the Democratic Party very slightly, but Georgia is still a state with a very long history of voting for Republicans. Even though Warnock has outraised Herschel Walker 3-1, this is definitely still going to be a race to watch. And so right now we only have Georgia as a tilt state for the Democratic Party, which means that it easily could go both ways, but we do have right now the Democrats with a very nominal edge. And in the state of Missouri, this race really is not that competitive. It's only barely a likely Republican state. But here, Eric Schmidt is leading over Trudy Valentine by around 12% in the polls. And then Trudy Valentine is the Democratic nominee. She defeated Lucas Kunce. It really wasn't that competitive of a race. Currently, she's doing pretty well in terms of fundraising against Schmidt. But in the end, Democrats are not going to win in Missouri. The race might have been close in 2016, but that's because Roy Blunt was so unpopular and Jason Kander was such a good Democratic nominee. Trudy Bush Valentine is not going to be anything like Jason Kander this year. And of course, Missouri is a state that has a very long history of being purple. However, now, in just the last 2 decades, it's become a very Republican state. 2020, Trump won it by a solid margin. If you go back to just 2004, George W. Bush only won the state by 7.2%, but McCain only won it by 0.1% in 2008. And then you go back to 1996, 1992, they were both won by Bill Clinton. So Missouri is not the competitive race that it was before, so now it's only going to be a likely Democratic state for the Republicans, but is very close to being solid, with Eric Schmidt currently expected to win his first full term in Congress. Next up, we have an election in one of the most purple states in the country, and that, of course, is the state of Nevada, a state with a partisanship of +0 for both parties. Right now, both parties control around the same amount of voters, and that includes independents as well, as of course independents do almost always have leans towards one party or another. So in Nevada, our forecast currently projects a very slight margin of victory for Catherine Cortez Masto, a score of just 8.4. We have Nevada currently rated as a tilt Democratic state. Now, Masto is up by 2.9% in the polls and has been leading for quite a while, but Nevada is still going to be a very close election. Laxalt lost the 2018 gubernatorial election to Steve Sisolak by 4.1%, so he's not exactly the best candidate, but not as terrible as some other GOP nominees in states like Arizona, Georgia, or especially Pennsylvania. Nevada is a flippable seat for the Republicans, but Masto still does have a very good chance at winning herself. She was first elected in 2016 to succeed Harry Reid, and with Democrats stagnating in the state, winning it by 2.4% in the last 2 elections, Nevada is definitely going to be a race to watch, as of course Democrats are not in the same position as they were in 2020 or 2016. Democrats right now are performing worse on average in the nationwide generic ballot. So right now, Nevada is going to be a tilt Democratic state, but just like Georgia, it could very easily go both ways. And moving on to New Hampshire, we saw the final primary of the 2020 cycle in New Hampshire just a couple of days ago. Here, Maggie Hassan was renominated, and she will now be challenged by Don Bolduc. Don Bolduc narrowly defeated Chuck Morse to win the Republican nomination, and this win is going to be something that Republicans will regret. Don Bolduc is not going to defeat Maggie Hassan. Currently, we have a score of 53.9, so it's just 1 point away from being likely for the Democratic Party. But right now, I do see Maggie Hassan definitely winning by at least a 4 to 5% margin. She is out fundraising Bolduc by 60 to 1. Hassan has raised over $30 million. Bolduc is at less than $1 million, only at $587,000. The polling shows Hassan up by 6.1%, and the only poll released since both of these candidates won their nominations showed Hassan up by 11 points, and this poll was conducted by Emerson College, a pollster that does typically tend to favor Republicans, and they also did a governor poll with the same 800 likely voters, and Chris Sununu, the Republican governor, was up by 15 points in that poll. So Maggie Hassan is doing very well right now in her race. Currently, it's just barely a lean Democratic state, and it does align with my personal rating as well. So New Hampshire, definitely a race that Republicans are probably not going to win, even though Don Bolduc is going to pump a ton of money into this race if he can even get it. But right now, even though New Hampshire has a state partisanship of 0 for both parties, just like Nevada, it is going to be a lean Democratic state. Next up, in North Carolina, Republicans have a slight advantage here. Ted Budd is not the actual incumbent. That is a typo. I'm going to go over and fix all of the typos right after this recording, so when you guys actually check out the site, there will not be any of these issues. And so obviously, this is only the first version of beta, so do expect there to be some mistakes. But Ted Budd right now is currently expected to win. We have a score of negative 22.9 in North Carolina, which means that Republicans are slightly favored. Sherry Beasley might be outpolling and also out fundraising Ted Budd, but she is the Democratic candidate in this race, and historical data has shown us that Democrats are probably not going to flip North Carolina in a year like 2022. All the other factors do favor Ted Budd, historical results, as well as the generic ballot, and then state partisanship as well. Sherry Beasley right now is not favored in this race because everything else besides polling and fundraising has Ted Budd in the better position. And so that's why North Carolina is going to be a lean Republican state according to our forecast. It's really not that close to being likely Republicans, so the GOP is not doing too well here. Honestly, North Carolina should be a likely state for the GOP, but as of right now, I can only give it a lean rating. And moving on to Ohio, we have the very high-profile race between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. Even though Tim Ryan is leading in the polls, we still do have J.D. Vance as the favored candidate simply because Republicans have done very well in Ohio in the last couple of years. We currently have a forecast score of negative 25.8, making Ohio a lean Republican state. J.D. Vance is not the incumbent. I will go fix that later as well. And so even though Tim Ryan is outperforming Vance in the polls, and also he's raised 7 times more money, J.D. Vance is still currently expected to win according to our model. I currently have J.D. Vance winning by around 3 to 4 percentage points. I do think that this race is much more competitive than it should be, just like North Carolina. Both Ohio and North Carolina should easily be likely Republican states in a year like 2022, but with the poor nominees of Ted Budd and J.D. Vance, they really are making these two races actually winnable for Democrats. Tim Ryan leading the polls is a pretty big deal, but if he were to actually win it, Tim Ryan would have to lead by a much larger margin. We saw Sherrod Brown outperform expectations in 2018. Even though he won, he was leading the polls by double digits and only managed a victory of 7%. And then in 2020, Joe Biden lost Ohio by 10 times the margin that polling had predicted. Now we have just 2 races left. These are the ones in Wisconsin and the Keystone State of Pennsylvania. So starting off with Pennsylvania, John Fetterman is leading in this race. Obviously, Mehmet Oz is a terrible nominee. We have a forecast score of 36.4, making Pennsylvania a lean Democratic state. And I do realize that I misspelled favored there as well. But John Fetterman is up in the polls right now by an average of 9.5% and has led in every single poll that has ever been conducted for this election. Even the Trafalgar Group has John Fetterman winning, and of course, this is a seat that Republicans currently hold. In 2016, Pat Toomey was reelected to a second term in office against Katie McGinty, and he did outperform polling expectations. But Mehmet Oz is doing much worse in the polls than Toomey was in 2016, so Mehmet Oz is going to have to do much better than what polling suggests compared to how much better Pat Toomey had to do, and that is basically impossible. John Fetterman is also severely outraising Mehmet Oz. These numbers are pretty old, the 25 million. They were updated almost 3 months ago, while the numbers from Mehmet Oz were updated very recently. So in reality, John Fetterman is doing even better in the fundraising. And so even though Pennsylvania is a very purple state, the polling average margin for John Fetterman and, of course, his fundraising numbers make it so that this state is going to be lean Democratic, and it will be almost a guaranteed flip at this point for the Democratic Party. Even though it's a lean state, I really cannot see Mehmet Oz being elected the successor to Pat Toomey. And finally, in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson is in a very tight race to win a third term in office. The incumbent since 2011, Ron Johnson honestly should be performing much better in this race, just like in Ohio and North Carolina. Right now, of course, we have Wisconsin as a tilt Republican state, but all three of these races should improve in their ratings by one. So Wisconsin should be a lean Republican state, while Ohio and North Carolina honestly should be likely. If you had just run generic Democrats and generic Republicans in these states, that is what those ratings would look like. But Ron Johnson, as a very unpopular incumbent, is struggling against Mandela Barnes. Barnes actually leads in the polls by 1.4%, and Ron Johnson's only advantage here is fundraising. He's up by around $11 million, so that is still pretty significant. But Ron Johnson has had 6 years to fundraise since he was reelected 6 years ago. So as of right now, Wisconsin is going to be one of the closest elections according to our forecast, but still, Ron Johnson, I think, is going to win his reelection. Personally, I have Wisconsin as being lean. My forecast just differs from my very own opinion by a very small amount. And so this is the 2022 Senate map based on my very own forecast. I have Democrats winning 51 seats, 49 for the Republicans, with 3 tilt races in Nevada, Wisconsin, and Georgia. These races could easily go both ways, which means that Democrats and Republicans both have a very good shot at maintaining or taking the majority back. Now, Republicans in Wisconsin, I do think that they have a better chance than what my forecast actually suggests. Well, Nevada and Georgia are 2 toss-ups, and I do agree that Democrats have a very slight edge in both of these races. You can, of course, also view this same map on my forecast website, so make sure you check it out at paelectionhq.com. And so now we'll compare my forecast to other ones that are out there. 538 uses a simulation model, and they have Democrats currently with a 71% chance at winning. Looking at their map, they favor Democrats, I think, slightly more than mine, and I do think my model will end up being more accurate than the one from 538. 538 is always known for overestimating Democrats. They did this in 2020 and in 2018 as well, and their ratings right now are much more favorable to the Democratic Party than mine are. So starting off with the states of Nevada, Georgia, and Wisconsin, according to my model, these are the 3 tilt races. They have Wisconsin and Georgia as being tilt. However, in Nevada, they currently give Kathleen Cortez Masto a 60% chance at winning, making it a lean Democratic state. And then in the states of Arizona and Colorado, both of these races are actually likely for the Democratic Party. They currently give Mark Haley a 77% chance at winning his full term in office against Blake Masters. I think a lean rating is more reasonable. Democrats are realistically not going to do as well as they did in 2020, and so winning by over 5% would mean that Mark Kelly would have to win by over double the margin. In the state of Missouri, they do have it as solid. I think it's going to be solid in the end as well, as the polling numbers will continue to go up for Eric Schmidt against Trudy Valentine. And then in Ohio and North Carolina, they're both going to be lean Republican races, just like my forecast. Florida is going to be likely, so no difference there. But in New Hampshire, they do have it as being likely for the Democrats, Pennsylvania as well. So I have both Pennsylvania and New Hampshire as being lean, and so that is just another difference between my forecast and 538. But overall, they still do forecast 51 seats for the Democrats, just like mine. Next up, we have probably the worst forecast out there, and that is the one made by The Economist. I really don't like this forecast. I think that they use polling data way too much. They have Ohio as a toss-up race, while states like Arizona are likely for Mark Kelly with a 91% chance that Kelly wins his re-election. So if we plot this down on a map that's easier to see, you'll see Nevada is a tilt Democratic state, Ohio is a tilt Republican state, and then Wisconsin is somehow a lean Republican state, with Florida and North Carolina both being lean for the GOP as well. Missouri is solid, but in the states of Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, and New Hampshire, we are seeing likely Democratic ratings, so not for the GOP, but for the Democrats. All 4 of these states are likely for the Democrats, and then Georgia is a lean Democratic state. So this will give Democrats 51 seats, 49 for the Republicans as well, but I think their ratings are just going to prove to be pretty inaccurate. The Economist definitely favors Democrats way too much in states like Arizona and Pennsylvania. I mean, just look at Pennsylvania. They give John Fetterman a 92% chance at winning. And finally, we have the Decision Desk HQ forecast. Not my favorite forecast either. I think that their rating in Wisconsin is just absolutely terrible. They have Ron Johnson at a 93% chance of winning. I don't know how this is possible, even though he's only up in the polls by 0.4%. I just don't get their logic here. And so in other races like Ohio and Pennsylvania, I think that the ratings aren't too bad there. Arizona being likely, I think, is going to end up being wrong. Every forecast that has Arizona as being likely for Mark Kelly is not going to be accurate. You cannot expect Democrats to do that well in a state that they just flipped in 2020. In Nevada, Masto is currently expected to win, just like Warnock in Georgia, but these races are still going to be tilt. So according to Decision Desk HQ, we also have a 51-49 map, except with some different ratings. Missouri is also going to be solid according to this forecast as well, but we're also seeing a likely Arizona. Lean races, though, in Pennsylvania and then New Hampshire is going to be likely, but we also have lean states of Ohio and North Carolina. Wisconsin is going to be likely. This is going to be the worst call from Decision Desk HQ, and then Florida is likely as well. So we still do have 51-49, but with a configuration that I think is even worse than the one from The Economist. And so this is my current forecast: 51-49 tilt races in Wisconsin, Georgia, and Nevada. This is the map according to 538. This is the map according to The Economist. And then finally, according to Decision Desk HQ, we have this map right here. So even though every single forecast projects 51 seats for Democrats, I think that mine is going to end up being the most accurate. Democrats, you really cannot overestimate them in too many races. I do think Pennsylvania and Arizona are going to be lean. I'm pretty confident in many of my ratings. Nevada and Georgia, of course, they can go both ways. So even though I have Democrats winning, these states could definitely go red, and we'll see two flips for Republicans, which would give them the Senate majority. Wisconsin, I think, is going to be a bit more solid than my forecast suggests for the GOP. Same with Missouri. But overall, I'm really happy with the model that I've created. I think that it will prove to be one of the most accurate ones, especially with the margins that it's currently projecting. And that'll be it for this video. You can view my site at paelectionhq.com, currently on a computer only. The mobile version is not exactly great. You'll see some pretty terrible graphics, and the actual version will be released, the full version will be released on the 1st of October, so you can expect a release very soon. We'll also have a gubernatorial forecast, and so I'll continue to update the site and also fix a lot of the issues that we have right now. So thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you like it down below. If you enjoyed, comment down below, do you think my forecast will be accurate, and how do you think it compares to other forecasts that are out there? Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video.